A man in a faded shirt and worn shoes stood at the first-class boarding gate, valid ticket in hand. The woman behind the counter looked him up and down, then froze. She did not scan the ticket. She did not check the system. She only said cold and flat that he was not suitable for the cabin, that he might dirty the seats. Seconds later, security was called. But just then, one phone call connected, and the voice on the other end went live on national television. What turned the situation around instantly. The morning at Denver International moved in its usual steady rhythm, rolling suitcases, distant boarding announcements, the low hum of a coffee machine somewhere down the concourse. Nathan Cole stood near gate B-22 with a worn leather duffel at his feet and a boarding pass tucked between two fingers. His shirt was soft at the collar from too many washes. His shoes had walked too many sidelines. None of that bothered him. He had spent 23 years not caring what people thought of how he looked. What he did care about was the ticket in his hand. First class. Seat 2A. He had bought it 3 weeks ago, late at night, after staring at the screen for almost an hour. It was the first time in his life he had ever paid for a seat in that cabin. He had told himself he had earned it. He still wasn't sure he believed it, but the charge had cleared, and the boarding pass was real, and the flight to Indianapolis was leaving in 47 minutes. For Nathan, this was not a vacation. He coached varsity basketball at Lincoln High in a small district north of the city. The team had clawed its way into a national showcase tournament, the first time in the program's history. Most of the staff were flying coach. Nathan had paid the difference himself quietly, the way he did most things. He had told his assistant he wanted a quiet seat, a clear head, and a real night of sleep before the biggest week of his career. That was true. It wasn't the whole truth. The whole truth was that he had been working 2 jobs since his wife passed, and he had decided finally that he was allowed to sit in a seat he had earned. He moved toward the front of the line with the same posture he carried into every gym, shoulders square, chin level expression, unreadable. People who knew him said Nathan didn't get rattled. People who didn't know him often mistook that calm for indifference. It wasn't. It was a habit built from grief and discipline, and a long understanding that the world rarely rewarded people who lost their composure. The gate agent at the counter wore a navy blazer with a small silver pin that read, Elaine Brooks. She had been smiling a moment earlier at the couple ahead of him. The smile thinned the second Nathan stepped forward and slid his boarding pass across the counter. Her eyes moved from the pass to his face, then down across the faded shirt, the duffel, the worn shoes, and back up. She did not pick up the scanner. "Sir," Elaine said, "I'm going to need you to step aside." Nathan kept his hand near the boarding pass. "Is there a problem with the ticket?" "There's a question about the booking," she said. Her voice was flat professional, the kind of tone people used when they had already decided something and were arranging the words to sound neutral. "It doesn't match the typical passenger profile for this cabin." Nathan let that sit in the air for a second. "What does that mean?" It wasn't a question. Elaine seemed to register that. Her eyes flicked to the line forming behind him, then back to his face. "It means I need to verify a few things before I can let you board, sir." Behind Nathan, a man in a charcoal suit shifted impatiently. A woman in heels glanced up from her phone and looked away again. Nobody said anything. Nobody met his eyes. The line at gate B-22 had become very quiet, very fast in that particular way. American crowds went quiet when something uncomfortable was unfolding, and nobody wanted to be the one to name it. Nathan stepped aside. He did not raise his voice. He set his duffel down at his feet and folded his hands loosely in front of him. "I'd like you to scan the ticket," he said. "If there's a problem, the system will flag it." Elaine did not pick up the scanner. Instead, she lifted the desk phone, turned her shoulder slightly, and spoke a few words too low for him to hear. When she set the receiver down, she looked back at him with something tighter in her face. "I've called for assistance," she said. "It'll just be a few minutes." "Assistance from who?" Airport security, Elaine said. It's a routine verification. Nathan absorbed that without moving. He had been called many things in his life by parents, in bleachers, by referees in tight games, and once years ago by a desk clerk in a hotel lobby who had decided before Nathan opened his mouth what kind of man he must be. He knew the shape of this. He knew the temperature of it. He also knew that the boarding pass in his hand had not been checked, that the system had not flagged anything, that nothing on the screen in front of Elaine Brooks could have told her his ticket was anything other than valid. The first uniformed officer arrived within 90 seconds. He looked younger than Nathan, maybe 26 or 27, with a cheap silver wedding ring and the kind of jaw that hadn't yet learned how to hide what it was thinking. His hand rested near his belt, the way men in that uniform were trained to stand. He looked at Elaine, then at Nathan, then at the boarding pass on the counter. "Sir, I'm going to ask you to come with me for a moment." "Has the ticket been checked?" Nathan asked. The officer glanced at Elaine. She did not answer. The officer turned back to Nathan. "Sir, please don't make this difficult." "I'm not making anything difficult," Nathan said quietly. "I'm asking a question. Has anyone checked the ticket?" "Sir," Nathan looked at the officer. He looked at Elaine. He looked at the line of passengers, the same passengers who had been smiling about their morning coffees 4 minutes ago, now suddenly very interested in their phones. He understood very precisely what was being asked of him. He understood the 2 doors he was standing between. He could push back. He could raise his voice. Demand a manager, demand. The scanner, demand. An explanation in front of every person standing there with a phone in their hand. He had every right to. And he knew exactly how that footage would look the moment it was clipped and posted. A tall man in a faded shirt voice, rising security closing in. He had watched men far more articulate than himself get reduced to 30-second clips. Once you became the man who shouted, you stopped being the man with the valid ticket, or he could do what they were waiting for him to do. Stay quiet. Step back. Let the morning swallow him. Miss the flight. Lose the seat he had bought. Let Elaine Brooks file whatever note she was going to file, and watch the next first-class passenger walk past him without a glance. Neither door was the right one. So Nathan did something else. He moved his hands behind his back slowly, in clear view of the officer, in clear view of every camera mounted in the ceiling of Gate B-22. It was the posture of a man who had nothing to hide and wanted that fact recorded. Then, without looking at Elaine, he spoke to the officer in a voice that carried just far enough to be heard by the people behind him. "I'd like to make one phone call," Nathan said, "before we go anywhere. That's my right." The officer hesitated. He glanced at Elaine. Elaine looked at the boarding pass she still had not scanned. Something in the air at Gate B-22 shifted by a single degree, small, but real, the way a room changes when someone with nothing to lose stops cooperating quietly. "One call," the officer said. Nathan reached into his pocket. The phone was old, the screen scratched. He scrolled past 2 contacts and stopped on a name he had not dialed in almost 6 years, a name attached to a man whose son Nathan had once coached, a man who had stood in Nathan's living room the night his wife passed and not said a single word for 3 hours because there was nothing to say. He pressed it. He lifted the phone to his ear, and while it rang, he kept his eyes level and unblinking on Elaine Brooks. He did not know yet that the voice about to answer that phone would within 4 minutes be coming through every television in the country. But Elaine Brooks did not know that either. The phone rang twice before a familiar voice answered. It was a voice that had narrated half of the country's evening news for the last 4 years, but it dropped its broadcast register the second it recognized the name on the screen. Coach Julian Cross said. There was something careful underneath the surprise, like a man checking a door he hadn't opened in a long time. "You okay? It's been a while." "Julian," Nathan said. His voice stayed low and even, but it carried across the few feet between him and Elaine Brooks. "I need a minute of your time," I'm at gate B22 at Denver International. I'm being held by a gate agent and a security officer. My boarding pass is valid. It has not been scanned. I'm not raising my voice. I'm not arguing. I just want a witness on the other end of this line. There was the smallest beat of silence on the call. Anyone who had ever watched Julian Cross on a Tuesday night broadcast would have recognized that small moment, the half-second he took before he committed to a story. "Stay on the line," Julian said. "Don't hang up. Don't move." Nathan didn't move. The young officer at his side stood with his hand resting near his belt, watching the call, watching Nathan's face, watching Elaine. Elaine had not picked up the scanner. The boarding pass still sat between her elbows on the counter, like something she didn't want to touch. "Sir," the officer said quietly, "you've made your call. Let's step away from the gate." "He's still on the line," Nathan said. "Sir, I'd like the gate agent to scan the ticket," Nathan said, addressing the officer directly, now his voice still calm. "That's the only thing I've asked for in the last 5 minutes. She has not done it. I'd like that on the record." A small ripple moved through the line of waiting passengers. A woman in a gray coat near the front had taken her phone out of her pocket. She wasn't looking at it. She was holding it at chest-height, lens forward. 2 seats down the row, a younger man in a hoodie had done the same. There were now at least 4 lenses aimed at the counter, and Elaine Brooks had begun to notice them. She straightened. "Sir, please. I am following internal procedures." "What procedures?" Nathan said. "That's not something I'm able to discuss at the gate." "You haven't scanned the ticket." "That's part of the procedure," Elaine answered, her voice tightening on the last word. Nathan let her sentence settle in the air without repeating it. The flatness of his silence did more work than any reply could have. He was simply letting the cameras hear what she had just said. In Nathan's ear, Julian Cross spoke again. "Coach, can you keep me on speaker for a second? I'm bringing a producer in." Nathan tilted the phone away from his face, just enough to thumb the speaker icon. The small voice from the device lifted into the air around the counter, low but audible to anyone within a few feet. "This is Julian Cross," the voice said, and a few heads in the line turned at the name. "I'm a national correspondent. I am currently on a live phone line with Nathan Cole at Gate B22 Denver International. Mr. Cole has a valid first-class boarding pass that has not been scanned. He has been detained at the counter by a gate agent and a security officer. I'm asking the agent on duty, ma'am, what is your name and your badge number, please?" Elaine's mouth opened. Nothing came out for a half-beat. Then her training caught up with her, and her face hardened into something more rehearsed. "Sir, I can't speak to a phone call. I am working with a passenger." "Mr. Cole is the passenger," Julian said. The voice was perfectly steady. There was no theater in it. That was what made it land. "Your name and your badge number, ma'am." "I'm not authorized to give that information over an outside line." "It's printed on your name tag, ma'am. We can read it from the footage." The woman in the gray coat at the front of the line lowered her phone slightly, then raised it again. The man in the hoodie had stopped pretending not to record. 2 more devices came out behind him. Whatever Elaine Brooks had been operating on, a quiet decision, a quiet delay, a quiet erasure of one passenger from the morning, was no longer quiet. "Coach," Julian said, his voice shifting register again. "Stay where you are. Don't move. We're going live in 90 seconds. Nathan didn't answer right away. He looked at the officer beside him. The officer was looking at Elaine, then at the boarding pass, then at the 4 lenses aimed at the counter from the line. Something behind his eyes was beginning to recalculate. "Officer," Nathan said quietly, "all I'm asking is for the ticket to be scanned. Before this goes any further, that's it." The officer's hand moved away from his belt. He glanced at Elaine. "Ma'am," he said, in a tone that had not been there 60 seconds ago. "Can you scan the ticket, please?" "I am following procedure, sir." "Ma'am, scan the ticket." "There is a verification step that comes before scanning, and I am one, so ma'am." In Nathan's hand, the phone clicked over. There was the faint shift in audio that anyone who had ever been on a live broadcast, knew the moment a private call became a national one. Julian Cross's voice came back smoothed slightly by the broadcast feed, and what he said next was no longer for Nathan alone. "Good morning. We're breaking into our hour with a developing story. I'm on a live line with Nathan Cole, who is being held at Gate B22 of Denver International Airport, with a valid first-class boarding pass that has not been scanned. Coach, are you with me?" Nathan kept his eyes on Elaine. "I'm here. Tell me in your own words what's happening right now." The line of passengers behind Nathan had stopped pretending. Devices were up. A woman near the back had her hand over her mouth. 3 gates down, a small cluster of travelers had drifted into the corridor between B22 and B20, drawn by the unusual stillness of the line. "I bought a ticket 3 weeks ago," Nathan said. He spoke slowly, evenly, the way a coach explained a play to a young guard who had never seen a full-court press before. "Seat 2A on the 847 to Indianapolis. I arrived at the gate at 7:52. I handed my boarding pass to the agent on duty. She looked at me. She did not scan the pass. She told me my ticket did not match the typical passenger profile for the cabin and asked me to step aside. She has not scanned the pass since. She called airport security. I have been standing here with my hands visible for approximately 8 minutes. Has anyone given you a reason?" Julian asked, "for why your boarding pass has not been scanned?" "No." "Mr. Cole, what do you do for a living?" "I coach high school basketball," Nathan said. "Lincoln High, north of the city. We have a national showcase in Indianapolis this week." The number of lenses aimed at the gate counter had now passed 10. Somewhere behind Nathan, a man said very quietly, "Oh my God." A woman near the boarding doors had begun to cry without making any noise. Elaine Brooks lifted her own desk phone again. Her hand was no longer steady on the receiver. She turned her shoulder the way she had 8 minutes ago and tried to speak in a low voice. The cameras in the line picked it up anyway. 2 of those phones were already streaming. "I need a supervisor at B22, Elaine said. "Immediately. There's a media situation." The phrase carried farther than she meant it to. Julian Cross, on the live broadcast, repeated it almost gently. "Ma'am has just described this as a media situation. Mr. Cole, for clarity, you didn't call our newsroom because you wanted media attention. You called because no one at that gate would scan a valid ticket. Is that correct?" "That's correct." "And up until you placed that phone call, what were your options?" Nathan considered that. The officer beside him had taken a small step back away from Nathan, closer to the counter. It was a tiny piece of body language, but every camera in that line caught it. The officer was no longer standing with the gate agent. He was standing between her and the passenger, and the angle of his shoulders had changed. "My options," Nathan said, "were to argue, which would have been used against me, or to stay quiet and be removed. I didn't want either of those to be the only record of what happened here this morning." There was a silence on the broadcast that was not empty. Anyone who had ever produced live television knew the value of a silence like that. Julian Cross let it stretch for 2 full seconds before he spoke again. "We're going to stay on this line," he said. "Folks, this is unfolding in real time. We've reached out to the airline for comment. We have not, as of this moment, received a response." Behind the counter, a second woman had appeared, taller, mid-50s navy blazer, a different kind of pin. The supervisor on duty, a woman named Patricia Lane. She took one look at the line of cameras, one look at Elaine's face, one look at the boarding pass still untouched on the counter, and her professional expression went to a place very deep behind her eyes. "Ms. Brooks," Patricia said, her voice low. "Step away from the counter." "Ma'am, I was following." "Step away from the counter." Patricia reached for the boarding pass. Her hand was steady. She picked up the scanner. The motion was small, almost casual, the kind of motion a gate agent performed 500 times a day without thought. The device beeped once, clean and bright. A green light flashed on the small screen at her elbow. The display read in small white letters, "Valid Seat 2. A boarding. The beep traveled. The cameras picked it up. The broadcast picked it up. Somewhere in a control room in New York, a producer named Vanessa Hill leaned closer to her monitor and said something quiet to her director, and the chyron at the bottom of the national feed updated in real time. Ticket. Confirmed valid Denver Gate incident. Nathan did not move. He did not smile. He did not look at Elaine Brooks. He looked at the green light on the small screen at the white letters, and then only then did he turn his head a quarter inch toward Julian Cross's voice in his hand. "It went through," Nathan said. "On the first try. We heard it, Coach." "It would have gone through 8 minutes ago," Nathan added, "if anyone had been willing to try." Patricia Lane closed her eyes for the briefest moment, and when she opened them, she was looking past Elaine, past Nathan, past the line of cameras into something Nathan recognized the face of a manager, calculating in real time exactly how much of a career she had just inherited the cleanup for. Elaine Brooks had not moved away from the counter. She was standing 2 feet to the side of it, her hands at her sides, her badge still pinned to her chest. Whatever she had decided 8 minutes ago, whatever shape she had been so sure of when Nathan first stepped up was still on her face. She had not yet reorganized it. She did not know how. The young officer beside Nathan cleared his throat. "Sirs," he said, and now he was not addressing the man he had been told to detain. He was addressing a passenger with a valid boarding pass. "I apologize for the inconvenience. The gate is yours." "I appreciate that," Nathan said. He did not move yet. On the broadcast, Julian Cross was speaking again, his voice taking the careful rhythm he used when a story had just turned. For viewers who are joining us, what you have just witnessed is the scanning of a valid first-class boarding pass that for the previous 9 minutes was held at this gate without being checked. The passenger, Mr. Nathan Cole, was detained without cause. The agent involved has been identified as Elaine Brooks. The airline has not yet provided a statement. We will stay with this story. Around the gate, the cameras did not lower. If anything more had appeared. Travelers from gates B20 and B24 had drifted closer. Patricia Lane was speaking in low, fast sentences into her own desk phone. Eyes on the floor, eyes on the scanner. Eyes anywhere but on the line of devices pointed at her counter. For a moment, standing in the middle of all of it, Nathan felt something he had not felt in the last 8 minutes. It was not vindication. It was not relief. It was something quieter and harder and older, the awareness of how thin the margin had been. He had made one phone call to a number he had not dialed in almost 6 years. If Julian Cross had not picked up, if Julian Cross had not been at his desk, if a producer in New York had been 1 second slower clearing the broadcast feed, if Patricia Lane had taken 3 more minutes to walk to the counter, if even one of those small pieces had moved differently, Nathan would have been escorted out of this concourse by now, and the only record of the morning would have been Elaine Brooks's note in an internal file. He understood very precisely that he had not won anything yet. He had only survived the part where the system most wanted him to disappear. What came next would not be decided at this counter. It would be decided in the rooms above it, the rooms with logos on the walls and lawyers on speakerphone, and in the rooms much farther above those. Patricia Lane lifted her head from her phone. Her eyes met Nathan's across the counter. She did not speak. She slid the boarding pass back across the counter with 2 fingers, gently the way a person handed back something they had no right to be holding. "Mr. Cole," Patricia said, "we'd like to escort you to your seat." Nathan picked up the boarding pass. He picked up the duffel at his feet. He did not look at Elaine Brooks. He did not need to. Every camera in the corridor was looking at her for him. He walked toward the jet bridge. The young officer fell in half a step behind, no longer escorting him out, now escorting him through. The line of cameras followed in a slow, silent arc, lenses tracking across the floor like a tide. In Nathan's hand, the phone was still live. Julian Cross's voice was still in it, narrating in that low broadcast register, telling the country in real time exactly what they had just watched. And behind Nathan, the airline's logo glowed white above an empty counter with a supervisor at the keyboard, an agent at her side, and 9 minutes of footage already loose in the world that no internal procedure could pull back. By the time Nathan reached seat 2A, the clip was already moving. A 38-second cut from the woman in the gray coat, the one who had raised her phone, first hit social media before the cabin door closed. It opened on Elaine Brooks's face, freezing on the line. It doesn't match the typical passenger profile for this cabin, and ended on the green light at the counter. By the time Nathan's flight reached cruising altitude, the clip had been viewed 4 million times. He did not see any of it. He sat in seat 2A with the duffel beneath the seat in front of him and his hands folded in his lap. A flight attendant, careful and quiet, asked if he wanted water. He said yes. She brought it without ceremony. He drank it slowly. He did not turn on the small screen at his elbow. He did not check his phone. For 3 hours over the Western Plains, Nathan Cole did the one thing he had been trying to do all morning, which was sit in a seat he had paid for. The story did not wait for him to land. By mid-morning, Eastern Time, every major network had picked up Julian Cross's broadcast. The Chiron rotated through different versions of the same sentence. The clip ran on a loop, the boarding pass, the long delay, the green light, when a different agent finally stepped in. Industry analysts were called. Civil rights attorneys were called. 3 former gate agents from 3 different airlines went on camera within the same hour, each of them describing, in careful language, the exact procedure that Elaine Brooks had skipped. The airline's first statement, issued mid-morning Eastern Time, said the company was aware of an incident at Denver International and was conducting an internal review. It satisfied no one. By noon, the hashtag was trending in 17 markets. By early afternoon, 2 members of Congress had asked on camera what the airline planned to do. In the early afternoon, Eastern Time, the airline's chief executive, a man named Marcus Reed, walked alone to a small podium in the lobby of the company's headquarters. He had no notes. The press release had been killed an hour earlier when his communications team realized that no piece of paper was going to be enough. This morning at Denver International Airport, Marcus Reed said, looking directly into the camera, a passenger with a valid first-class boarding pass was detained at the gate by one of our employees. The boarding pass was not scanned. The passenger, Mr. Nathan Cole, did nothing wrong. He was held because of an assumption that should never have been made by anyone wearing this company's uniform. He took one breath and continued. The agent involved has been suspended, pending a full investigation. Effective immediately, every gate at every hub we operate will require a boarding pass to be scanned before any verbal challenge to a passenger can be made. That procedure existed before this morning. It was not followed. It will be followed from this moment forward without exception. He looked off camera once, then back. To Mr. Cole, on behalf of every employee of this airline, I am sorry. We have reached out to him directly. Whatever he chooses to do with this morning, we will support. We failed him. We will not fail the next passenger who walks up to one of our counters. The press conference ran for 11 minutes. Marcus Reed took 6 questions. He answered all of them. He used Nathan's name every time. Nathan watched the recorded conference on a small television in a hotel lobby in Indianapolis an hour after he checked in. He had dropped his duffel in the room and come back down for coffee before the team meeting. The lobby had gone quiet around the screen. A man in a dark suit at the next table looked up at Nathan, then at the television, then at Nathan again, and recognized him without saying anything. A woman behind the front desk had pressed a hand flat against the counter. Nathan watched the apology end. He drank his coffee. He did not say anything. 2 days later, the airline reached out through a private number. A vice president of customer relations, careful and rehearsed, offered him a settlement. Lifetime first-class travel. A 6-figure sum that the man would not say out loud, only describe as meaningful. A statement of partnership. A foundation in his name if he wanted one. Nathan listened to the entire offer without interrupting. When the man finished, Nathan said, "I appreciate the call. I'd like the policy change to be permanent. I'd like the training to be required at every hub, not just the ones with cameras. And I'd like the apology Mr. Reed gave on television to remain on the company's public record." "Of course, Mr. Cole. That's already in motion. About the compensation, I don't want it," Nathan said. "I bought the seat. I sat in it. That's all I needed from you." The line was quiet for a moment, in a way the vice president hadn't been trained for. Nathan let him have it. Then he said, "Thank you for the call," and hung up. He told no one about the offer. Not the assistant coach. Not the team. Not Julian Cross, who had sent a single text the night of the broadcast that read, "Only, anytime, always." Nathan had texted back 2 words, "Thank you." He had not been ready 6 years ago to keep the friendship that had cost him things he didn't talk about. He was not ready now to use it for anything but what it had been used for that morning. Some debts a man paid by not asking for more. The Lincoln High team played the showcase. They did not win. They lost in the quarterfinals to a program with twice their budget and 4 returning seniors. Nathan shook the other coach's hand, at center court, gathered his players in the tunnel, and told them in the quiet voice he had used on the phone at Gate B22 that they had done themselves and their school proud. He did not mention the airport. None of his players mentioned it either. They had all seen the clip. They had also all seen on the bus from the hotel that morning the way their coach carried himself into the arena, which was the same way he had carried himself into every gym they had ever played in. There was nothing to say about it. Elaine Brooks did not return to the gate. The airline's investigation, made public 11 days later, found that she had violated 3 separate procedural requirements in the 9 minutes she had held Nathan's boarding pass. She was terminated. She did not give an interview. A reporter found her once in the parking lot of an unemployment office in suburban Denver and asked her on camera what she would say to Nathan Cole if he were standing there. She looked at the camera for a long moment. Then she said, "I would say I was wrong." She did not say anything else. The clip was 19 seconds long. It was the only sentence she ever said publicly about the morning of November 4th. Nathan flew home from Indianapolis on a Sunday night, and coach on a different airline. He had not chosen the carrier for any reason other than the schedule. He sat in a middle seat near the back. The man next to him, a salesman returning from a conference, recognized his face halfway through the flight and started to say something. Nathan met his eyes once kindly, and the man understood and went back to his book. When the plane landed in Denver, Nathan stood in the aisle with the other passengers waiting for the door to open. He did not feel triumphant. He did not feel finished. He felt the way he had felt on 1,000 other Sunday nights, walking out of a gym after a long road trip, tired, clear, grateful for the quiet and ready in the morning to go back to work. He walked off the plane the same way he had walked onto it, hands at his sides, boarding pass folded in his pocket. A man who had paid for his seat sat in it and gone home.